You know the scene, right? A huge game is on. One person is on the edge of their seat, screaming at the TV, living and dying with every single play. And someone else, in the exact same room, they're just kind of scrolling on their phone, completely unfazed. So what's going on there? Today, we're going to dive deep into the real science behind this massive divide. And let's just get this out of the way right now. This isn't about some people being more passionate or more fun than others. No way. What we're actually looking at is some pretty fascinating stuff about how differently our brains can be wired. We're going to explore the neurochemical reasons behind one of life's great divides, the fan versus the non-fan. And trust me, this divide is huge. Just look at these numbers. Around 60% of Americans follow sports, and a lot of them are, completely devoted. But that leaves this massive chunk, 40% of the entire population, that just doesn't really get the hype. We're talking about tens of millions of people whose brains are basically on a completely different channel when a game comes on. So, that's the big question, isn't it? What is actually happening inside the brains of that other 40%? Is there a real biological reason they feel so indifferent? Well, it turns out the answer is a big, resounding yes. Okay, so the first piece of this puzzle goes way, way back. We're talking about our ancient, hardwired survival instincts. It all kicks off with this idea of the tribe. For thousands and thousands of years, being part of a tribe was everything. It meant protection, it meant food, it meant survival. Your brain is literally built to find a group to belong to. And today, since we don't have to worry about saber-toothed tigers anymore, sports teams have become the modern tribe for a lot of people. Just, with much better merchandise. And here's where the chemistry kicks in. For a fan, watching their team play actually releases oxytocin. That's the bonding hormone. It's the same chemical that connects mothers and babies, and it basically tricks the fan's brain into seeing these athletes as their clan. Non-fans, on the other hand, just tend to have lower tribal instincts. Their identity is a bit more individualistic, so they don't get that same us versus them chemical rush, and they're not wired to automatically hate the other team just because they're wearing different colored jerseys.
But belonging is only one part of the equation. The brain of a sports fan is also playing a totally different chemical game, and the star player here is dopamine.
Now get this, fMRI scans, the ones that literally light up the active parts of our brains, they show that watching a close, competitive game fires up the exact same reward centers as gambling. To your brain, the thrill is almost identical. It doesn't care if it's a touchdown or a jackpot, it just knows it's getting a fix. And here's why it's so incredibly compelling. It's a perfect loop. First, you have an uncertain outcome. Who's going to win? That anticipation fires up your dopamine. But here's the kicker. Because your team doesn't always win, you get something called intermittent reinforcement. Psychologists will tell you this is the most powerful reward system there is. It's the same principle that makes slot machines so addictive. Because the reward is unpredictable, it feels even better when you get it, and your brain just starts to crave more and more.
So for non-fans, and this is really the key, that entire dopamine loop just doesn't get switched on by watching other people compete. Their brains simply don't get the same chemical payoff from it. And you're not going to believe this, research is now suggesting this could actually be genetic. Yep, certain variations in your dopamine receptor genes might predict how much you enjoy watching sports. Your indifference could literally be written in your DNA.
So, you've got all these crazy chemical reactions happening. The bonding from oxytocin, the craving from dopamine, and it all leads to something even deeper. The lines between a person's identity and their team's fate start to blur. For a true fan, a team's game isn't just something they watch, it's something that happens to them.
Have you ever noticed this? This tiny little switch in pronouns says it all. There's actually a psychology term for it, basking in reflected glory. When the team wins, the fan's identity expands to absorb that victory. We won. But when they lose, suddenly they create some distance. They lost. It's a totally unconscious trick to protect their own self-esteem.
And this is the result. A fan's self-esteem can be a total roller coaster, soaring after a win and then crashing after a loss. And it's all based on something they have absolutely zero control over. The non-fan, on the other hand, well, their sense of self is usually more stable. Their self-worth isn't on the line every weekend. It's just more internally grounded and consistent. Okay, so if a fan's self-esteem is so wrapped up in their team, does that just mean they're more emotional people? Well, not really. It's more about how they budget a resource that we all have a limited supply of: empathy. Think about your emotional energy like a pie chart. For a really dedicated fan, a huge slice of that empathy pie is given over to their team. They feel the player's struggles, they celebrate their victories, they agonize over their losses. They are practicing deep, real empathy for a group of strangers.
Now, for the non-fan, that slice of the pie isn't missing, it's just been reallocated. Their deep emotional investment, that empathy, it might go towards art, or music, or social causes, or their own personal projects. They're getting those same powerful feelings of meaning and connection, just from a totally different source.
So as we start to put all these pieces together, it becomes pretty clear that this isn't about one way of being that's right and one that's wrong. It's about two fundamentally different but equally valid strategies for finding a story and finding meaning in life.
Researchers actually have names for this. They call it the difference between a parasocial investment and direct engagement. The fan builds this powerful, one-sided emotional relationship with a team. They find meaning as a spectator in this huge external drama. The non-fan, meanwhile, tends to prefer putting their emotional energy where there's some give and take, in relationships, in hobbies, in work, where they are an active participant in their own story.
At the end of the day, both groups are really looking for the exact same thing. A compelling story. It's a fundamental human need. It's just that one person finds that epic narrative in a last-second touchdown or a miraculous championship run, and the other person finds that exact same feeling of awe and meaning in a brilliant book, a complicated relationship, or a mind-blowing scientific discovery.
So neither is better or worse. They're just two different neurological strategies for experiencing what it means to be human. So the real question isn't whether you're a fan or not. The real question is, what story are you invested in? What game are you playing?